years. Is that right?
Yes.
And if I could ask you, please, sir, to look at Exhibit 4361. Tell me when you have that.
I'm there.
Excellent. And do you recognize this to be an Epic Game Store deck regarding a review of performance and strategy for the store that was created for a presentation on October 25, 2019?
Yes.
And if you could please turn, sir, to page .020, page 20.
Yes.
And this shows a 5-year P&L and user forecast, correct?
Yes.
And this is a 5-year forecast as of October 2019, correct?
These are multiple versions of forecasts.
One being an aggressive pursuit model, correct?
Yes.
And what is an aggressive pursuit model?
This was Epic very heavily investing in the business to promote growth.
And the other being the winding down model, correct?
Yes, this was looking at the worst case scenario where the store fails and we have to pay out minimum guarantees despite that.
All right. So let's look first at the aggressive pursuit model, and I will drive straight to the bottom line here. If we look down to the...
Warren, I'm going to stop you for a moment. I don't have that document when I get it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
4361.
You can hand one up if you'd like. DX, Your Honor. 4361. 61. 61. 61. 61. 61. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Sweeney, on page .020 of Exhibit 4361, I'd ask you to look, please, at the EBIT lines for these two scenarios. Do you see those lines?
Yes.
And what is EBIT?
Earnings before interest and corporate tax.
Okay. And this shows, this tracks earnings, if you will, these estimated earnings, both on an annual basis across these years from 2019 to 2027 and on a cumulative projected basis, correct?
Yes.
So in other words, how the company, the store is projected to do each year, and then how the store is projected to have done taken together over the years, correct?
Yes.
And if we look at those lines, we see that when we get out to 2024 under the aggressive pursuit model, that is the first year where a profit is projected, correct?
Yes.
But the cumulative, and that is a profit of, is that $15 million?
Yes.
But it was also projected that as of 2024, the cumulative earnings of the company would be a negative $854 million?
Yes, that's the cumulative earnings of this store.
The cumulative earnings will be negative $854 million, correct?
Yes.
And if we then track out what is called here as the flow from prior years to 2025, 2026, and 2027, by 2027, the store is still estimated to be in a cumulative negative state of a loss of $719 million, correct? And the estimated earnings for that year, for that year standing alone, is only $5 million, correct?
Yes.
And then if we look over at the winding down model, we see that if we go out to 2024, that is the first year where there is a projected profit, a positive amount of money for operations for that year alone, correct?
Yes.
That's $36 million.
Yes.
And there would still be a cumulative loss under the winding down model of $654 million, correct?
Yes.
And if we go out to 2027, we see that the cumulative loss would be $642 million, correct?
Yes.
And of course, these numbers don't include any of the unallocated costs and expenses we talked about before, correct? For example, any of the shared technology development that may benefit the store.
I need a minute. I'm not sure that's correct. There's a people cost running into the tens of millions of dollars in this model. So I think the finance team may have attempted to do some cost attribution.
So, Mr. Sweeney, are you saying that there may be a headcount costs in here?
Yes.
Okay.
The line called people.
So among the expenses that are included in these forecasts are the headcount expenses specific to the store, correct?
I don't know what the finance team was referring to when they were people here.
But there are no engineering costs in here anywhere, are there?
I don't know whether engineering costs are included in people.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney, let's talk for a few minutes. And we'll
Okay, can I just make sure our record is clear? Are you moving
Thank you, Your Honor. I would have gotten there eventually. Can I please move, first of all, BX3818 into evidence, if I haven't done that?
You haven't. So 3818 is admitted, but we'll wait until I hear from Ms. Forrest
Thank you,
after
Your Honor.
lunch.
And I'd also move to admit exhibit BX4361.
I assume no objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
4361 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Sweeney, you testified yesterday that by the spring of 2020 you had initiated Project Liberty, correct?
You were in the planning and preparation phases at that point.
Okay, and by that time you had hired your lawyers who helped you implement that, correct?
That's saying yes.
And those are the lawyers who represented you in this lawsuit?
Yes.
And you also, in the spring, you hired a public relations firm, correct?
Yes.
And by May 2020, you had settled on your strategy regarding the hot fix, correct?
At that point, we had a plan of record that was plan of record that included the hot fix.
And so if you could please take a look at exhibit 4419, DX 4419. Do you have that exhibit in front of you?
Yes.
And do you recognize this to be an internal Epic email chain from May 11th, 2020?
Yes.
And the first email at the top of the first page is actually from a gentleman named Mark Rain, correct?
Yes.
And he's the co-founder of Epic Games?
Yes, he joined Epic in 1992.
And he owns about 4% of the company?
Thereabouts.
And if we could go back, please, to the first email in this chain from May 11th at 11:25 a.m. It's from Daniel Vogel. Who is Mr. Vogel?
Daniel Vogel is Epic's Chief Operating Officer.
And Mr. Vogel states, making sure we are all in alignment on approach and what to focus our limited mind share on. And then he goes on to say, the critical dependency on going live with our V-Bucks price reduction efforts is finding the most effective way to get Apple and Google to reconsider without us looking like the baddies. Do you see that?
Yes.
And did you agree with Mr. Vogel that that was a critical issue related to Project Liberty?
I was focused on various other things.
Okay, you were leaving this to Mr. Vogel, the Chief Operations Officer. He played a major role in the planning of the price stop. Thank you. Now we go on to say, he goes on to say, here is my understanding of the plan. We submit a build to Google and Apple with the ability to hotfix on our payment method that passes the savings on to customers. We flip the switch when we know we can get by without having to update the client for 3 weeks or so. Our message is about passing on price savings to players. Google and Apple will immediately pull the build for new players and potentially take an even more aggressive stance. And first of all, you agree with Mr. Vogel about what the plan regarding the hotfix was as of May 11, 2020, correct?
Yes, that's the plan pertaining to the hotfix.
Okay. And the point in flipping the switch at a point where there would be 3 weeks until an update was that even after the direct pay option had been implemented, it would remain in place for players, and they would be able to continue playing cross-platform because they would be on the same version as other players on other platforms, correct?
Yes.
But after Fortnite was updated and the version on iOS remained the previous version because Apple had pulled it, the players on iOS would no longer be able to interact with other platforms. Correct.
Apple and Google blocked Fortnite, which I was not certain would happen.
Mr. Vogel was there, wasn't
he? Mr. Vogel was here certain.
And your email on page 1 from May 11th at 12:44 p.m. It's about 2/3 of the way down the page. Let me know when you see that.
Yeah.
And you say, hi, Ed, and you're referring now to Ed Zobrist in the email below?
Yes.
Who is Mr. Zobrist?
An Epic executive involved in our mobile gaming strategy.
You say, hi, Ed, I don't seem to be invited to a Wednesday meeting. Please add me to all meetings on the topic. Please keep me in the loop on this topic 100%. Please feel free to come to me directly in email or otherwise anytime to get clarification on anything. Otherwise, it heads off the rails and I have to fix it and undo a bunch of work. You're referring now to your general efforts as the leader of the Project Liberty initiative, correct?
Yes.
Now, yesterday we discussed with your counsel that on June 30th, 2020, Epic sent an email to Tim Cook, Bill Schiller, Craig Federighi, and Matt Fisher, correct?
Yes.
And that was also the same day that Epic renewed its developer program license agreement, wasn't it?
I'm not aware. I'm aware that we renewed our agreement in June sometime.
You are aware that Epic renewed its developer program license agreement in June 2020 within hours, days, or weeks of sending this email, correct?
Yeah.
And let's turn back to Exhibit 4477.
Move amendment 4419.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to admit 4419.
Seeing no objection,
No objection, Your Honor.
submitted.
Mr. Sweeney, have you managed to locate 4477?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Mr. Sweeney, just a couple quick comments on this since you did address it yesterday. But in your email, after setting out your two demands for computing payment processing options and also a computing Epic Game Store app available through the iOS App Store and through direct installation that has equal access to the underlying operating system features for software installation and update as the iOS App Store itself has. Let me pause there. Those are the two things you were asking for on June 30th, 2020, correct?
And also that we hope that Apple will make these options available to all iOS developers.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. But the two items you were demanding are set out at the top under items 1 and 2, correct?
These are the options. These are the capabilities I said Epic would like to offer. Capabilities that we would like to offer consumers.
And Mr. Sweeney, after saying that you hope that Apple will also make these options equally available to all iOS developers, in the next paragraph, you note that in order for Epic to have these two capabilities, Apple would need to provide a side letter or alter its contracts and standards documents to remove such restrictions to allow Epic to provide a competing app store and competing payment processing option to iOS customers. That's what you said on June 30th, 2020, correct?
Yes.
And you went on to say, please confirm within 2 weeks if Apple agrees in principle to allow Epic to provide a competing app store and competing payment processing, in which case we will meet with your team to work out the details. Correct? That's what you said on June 30th, 2020?
Yes.
By the way, Mr. Sweeney, if I look down further in that last paragraph, you state, if we do not receive your confirmation, we will understand that Apple is not willing to make the changes necessary to allow us to provide Android users with the option of choosing their App Store and payment processing system. Do you see that?
Yes, that's my typo.
Can I assume you sent this same email message to Google on June 30th, 2020?
Similar email to Google on that same day. A little bit too similar.
So that one you generally referred to Android rather than Apple, correct?
Yes.
And here you just missed changing Android to Apple in one instance, correct?
Yes, sir.
So this is essentially a form demand letter, correct?
This was clearly customized to the specific policies of each platform, which differs.
Mr. Sweeney, if we could please look at Exhibit DX3774. Let me know when you're there, sir. And do you recognize Exhibit DX3774 as an update to the Board of Directors on Project Liberty dated July 27, 2020?
It's either the update we gave the board or a draft of it.
And if you would turn, please, sir, to page 2. 002. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And you state here that, and by the way, you are the chairman of the board of Epic Games, correct?
Yes.
And you state here that the time is now. Solve this problem before AR takes off, and that rate is set at 30%. Did I read that correctly at the bottom of the page?
Yes.
And AR is a reference to augmented reality?
Yes.
And that's a recent innovation in gaming?
I think it's a technology that's still in development in gaming.
Fair enough. So it's kind of the bleeding edge of gaming technology, correct?
Gaming and also consumer computing.
And in fact, Apple engineers are at the cutting edge of augmented reality, correct?
Apple, the robust AR SDK, as do several other companies.
And you're familiar then with Apple's AR kit?
Yes.
And in fact, Unreal Engine supports AR kit, correct?
Yes.
Meaning that it helps developers to work with it, correct?
Yes.
And you believe that Apple, through its innovations in AR, is going to be a meaningful participant in augmented reality gaming going forward, correct?
I expected Apple to be a significant AR market participant in the future.
And yesterday, you testified in response to a question that revenue for Epic Games in 2020 was up. Do you recall that testimony generally?
Yes.
But you weren't asked anything about 2019, were you?
No.
And Epic's revenue in 2019 was down from 2018, correct?
Yes.
And while it was up in 2020, it was not back up to 2018 levels, was it?
At what point in time?
Let's go year over year, sir.
Sorry, I'm not certain of Epic's 2018 revenues.
You are certain, though, aren't you, sir, that 2020 received a particularly historically unique pop because of the pandemic?
Yes.
Lots of people at home looking to do things, correct?
Yes.
So lots of people playing digital video games like Fortnite, correct?
Lots of people were playing Fortnite.
Yes. And if you would go back, please, to exhibit PX2463. This was a document used with you by Ethics Council.
2463.
Yeah, it was not in the binder I've handed you. It would have been provided by your counsel yesterday.
So did you give him that document?
I have not handed it up. I'm about to, Your Honor. I have another copy for the court. Yeah, Coach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was previously admitted.
Mr. Sweeney, now that I provided it to you, do you have exhibit PX2463 in front of you?
Yes.
And just go down, please, to on the first page of that exhibit, under the highlights section. Do you see that?
Yes.
States that total gross revenue in the second quarter of 2019 was $1.1 billion, down 27% year over year. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And this information from Mr. Babcock would be accurate information, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Who's Mr. Babcock?
He was Epic's CFO at the time.
And when does Epic's second quarter end?
End of June.
And if you would turn to page 2, please, under Q3 Outlook, or 3Q19 Outlook. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the first bullet point states, we currently expect Fortnite to generate $802 million in gross revenue in 3Q19 28% lower than our initial forecast of $1.1 billion. Do you see that statement?
Yes.
And does that accurately reflect Epic's expectations about 3Q19 as of the date of this document?
Yes.
Now, Epic submitted the code that ultimately facilitated the hotfix on August 3rd, 2020. Do you recall that?
I don't remember the date, but I remember the general content, yes.
Very early August, correct?
To my knowledge.
And it was reviewed and uploaded within 24 hours by Apple, correct?
I don't know.
But you do know that the nature of the build and the hidden code was not disclosed to Apple, correct?
Correct.
And the day after it was approved, you sent a note to Microsoft, didn't you?
I remember the timing. I remember I sent an email to Phil Spencer.
Let's take a look at that email, please. It is Exhibit DX4579. Very back of your binder.
Yeah.
And Mr. Sweeney, do you recognize Exhibit DX4579 to be an email from you to Mr. Spencer on August 5, 2020?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move Exhibit 4579 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
In the third paragraph of Exhibit 4579, you state that Epic has certain plans for August that will provide an extraordinary opportunity to highlight the value proposition of consoles and PCs in contrast to mobile platforms and to onboard new console users. That's a statement you made to Mr. Spencer on August 5, 2020, correct?
Yes.
You then go on to say, while I can't share details with any third party at this point, I give you Epic's assurance that our efforts will be positive and supportive of Microsoft Xbox, and Windows, correct?
Yes.
And you're referring here to the hotfix, aren't you?
Referring to Epic points of positivity.
Yeah. And you believe that it would make consoles and PCs appear to present a better value proposition to users in contrast to mobile platforms, correct?
Yes.
And you believe that would be an important thing for Mr. Spencer to know, correct?
Yes.
That he would be pleased with that?
I think I was presenting it as an opportunity to Microsoft.
And you also talk about it providing him the opportunity to onboard new console users, correct?
Yes.
And then 2 days later, you kind of reminded Mr. Spencer about what was about to happen, didn't you?
Not sure.
Let's take a look, please, at Exhibit 3478. No? When you there, sir?
Yes.
And do you recognize this to be an email exchange between you and Mr. Spencer on August 6th and August 7th of 2020?
Yes.
And in an email on August 7th, you respond to Mr. Spencer's message and you say, totally understood. I gather there's a lot going on at Microsoft nowadays. You stated that, correct?
Yes.
And then you go on to say, anyway, you'll enjoy the upcoming fireworks show. And that's a reference to Project Liberty, isn't it?
Yes.
And the fireworks show happened on August 13th, 2020, correct?
Figuratively, yes.
Figuratively. That was when, figuratively, the flip was switched on the hotfix, correct?
No, literally.
That was literal. All right. The hotfix was implemented.
Yes.
And the direct pay function was put in place within Fortnite on iOS.
Yes.
And you notified Apple around 2 a.m. Pacific time on August 13th, correct?
Yes.
And we've already seen that document, haven't we?
Yes.
And that was the first time that Apple was ever told of Epic's plans, correct?
Yes.
After it had been implemented, right?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry. I believe the notification was roughly simultaneous with implementation.
Thank you. And after the hotfix was triggered, you launched a PR campaign, correct?
After the hotfix was triggered, Epic announced the Fortnite Mega Drop, price drop.
And you also announced the free Fortnite Cup, correct?
We did that after Apple had bought